Alrighty, so we are now officially 3 games into the MLS season, and while it is still just really early into the season, I mean, we're not even 1/10 of the season in, and not even in the first month of the season as the calendar turned to March. I want to kind of do a video looking at some early observation that I've seen after 3 games into the season, because there are definitely some big observation that I can see throughout this early season that could be a talking point throughout the season. And even though, as I said, it's early in the season, we definitely have a little bit of a sample size of which team is doing well in the beginning of the season, which team is not, some surprises as well, and even talk about head coaches that potentially can already be on the hot seat, even though we're 3 games into the season. Now, the first observation I want to talk about is Messi. So obviously, there's no doubt that I know heading into this season, there was a lot of question of how exactly Javier Mascherano and this Inter Miami team is going to do when it comes to Messi and the amount of games that he play. Well, it feels like they're definitely not playing him as much game as possible, and they're definitely preserve him because in the last 3 games, it is pretty clear that he's gone in full low management mode. He's missing the last 3 games, did not start in any of the 3 games. He was on the bench against Charlotte, but didn't come off the bench, and there could be a case that we'll see whether or not if he's going to be available for that game against Cavalier down in Jamaica. I'm assuming probably he might be available, especially I'm pretty sure the fans in Jamaica is not going to be very happy if he doesn't make an appearance, especially with that game being sold out so far in advance, and tickets to that game is relatively expensive. But that being said, I know there's been a lot of controversy surrounding Messi and his involvement, and I want to kind of reiterate what I said before the season, where if you're going to expect Messi to play every single game for Inter Miami, that is unrealistic. And we know that of course is the case, and there is going to be the reality that Messi will not be available, and that Inter Miami is going to do whatever they take to protect their golden goose. And it's not like the fact that this with them not having Messi in the starting 11 is hurting them whatsoever. I mean, all these supporting cast and some of these winter transfer signing in Alande and Segovia has stepped up big way in the attacking role as well, and even some of his friends have stepped up in a big way as well. Suarez has looked as good as he has ever been, and doesn't seem like Father Time has slowed him down whatsoever. Same goes for Sergio Busquets and Jordi Alba. And I also have heard about how people say, well, if those guys can play every single game, why can't Messi do the same thing? Well, here's the thing. Every player is different, and there's definitely a sense that when you see these older player, and especially Messi will definitely know his body and what he can do and what he can do. And this also goes back to what I said about the fact that Inter Miami really want to protect their golden goose. I mean, the other players that they have beside Messi is very important as well, and his friends is also important. But if his friends is good to go, and if Suarez says that he's good to go every single game, and he's not playing with any pain whatsoever, then yeah, Inter Miami is going to let him do so. So again, I do think that there is definitely an overreaction when it comes to Messi availability, and I know obviously not only just the casual fans, but I'm pretty sure people that is in charge of Apple TV, the CEO, and even Don Gabbard probably are not happy the fact that he's not been available in the last couple of games, with the rating being relatively worse compared to last season. But that's just kind of the reality of what I reiterate, the fact that Messi's not going to play every single game, and that I think for people that buy tickets to watch Inter Miami play, whether it's at home and on the road, they should acknowledge the fact that there is a risk where there could be a chance that Messi might not play. And I know that some people will say, "Well, I pay hundreds of dollars to do so." Well, again, that's the risk that you're basically taking, and that I understand it can be frustrated to pay like 400 $500 to not see him play in person, but you got to know that this is a guy that is near the twilight of his career. This could be his last season with Inter Miami, and maybe even in MLS if the rumors is true that he's going to be returning to Barcelona. So I think at the end of the day, we should just enjoy while it lasts, because, like I said, it's not going to be a while before the greatest player of all time will not be playing in this league relatively soon. Now, The other observation that I made in the second observation is Vancouver and the Philadelphia Union at the top of the Supporter Shield standing. So if you would have told me in the beginning of the season that these two teams are the teams at the top of the Supporter Shield standings, and I believe they're the last two teams to remain perfect in the beginning of the season to win all three games, I would have not believed you whatsoever. I mean, I predicted Vancouver to finish dead last in the West. Yeah, I would like to change that prediction in a heartbeat. And Jasper Sorensen has proved everybody wrong. And the same goes with the Philadelphia Union as well. You know, there was a lot of doubters with Bradley Carnell being in this in this gig and have a huge shoes to fill with Jim Grim being here for a very long time, and also the so-called rebuild and retool that they're going through. That yeah, it turns out it definitely has gone relatively smoothly, and even some of the old core pieces that they still have stepped up in a big way. Now, obviously, it'll be interesting to see whether or not if both of these teams can continue this incredible run of form. I would say Philly probably has a better shot of it because I do think that with the pieces that they have, they look like a team that could surprise a lot of people in the East and can instantly jump themselves back to where they were in the conversation of being one of the top Eastern Conference team for many years. Vancouver, though, I'm not quite sure. I do think that there probably is a bit of a drop off, especially with the way that in the last game I mentioned how that was a costly victory because Ryan Gaul will see what is his status in terms of the injury, and especially the way that he limped off after the end of the game, and especially the fact that it was a non-contact injury. You just hope it's not the worst of a torn ACL kind of injury. So yeah, we'll see whether or not they get some good news in that department, and not to mention they're now suffering some big injuries to some of their key guys besides Ryan Gaul. There's no doubt that I think Philly will have a chance to continue this pace, and Vancouver definitely is going to come back down to earth as we speak. And then, of course, the third thing, it goes to what I talked about why the Union has been relatively successful, and that is the revelation of Ty Baribo. I mean, last season we know what he did in the second half of the season, just kind of came out of nowhere and be a perfect replacement to Julian Carranza. But then when the goals dried up, we thought that that was kind of a flash in the pants in terms of how well he did in the beginning of the season. But no, this season he's shown that when he jumped into the scene of MLS and really showcases goal scoring prowess, that was not a fluke. I mean, it has carried into this season and then some. I mean, 6 goals in the first 3 games. Obviously, I don't think he's going to be on pace in terms of scoring 60 plus goal this season. That would be absolutely insane to say. But the fact that he has actually tied the record for the most goal any player have scored after the first 3 games in the season, it just shows you that he is a guy that not only is a perfect replacement to Julian Carranza. I mean, it's almost like Union fans have not missed Julian Carranza whatsoever because of the ability that Baribo has done. But he's going to be a guy that I would not be surprised could be right up there in terms of the Golden Boot race. I mean, he's already got a big lead over a lot of players that is in the Golden Boot race, and I would not be surprised he's not going to slow down it anytime soon when it comes to the goal scoring. And then of course San Diego FC, the incredible start to life in MLS. So this is the second time we've seen an expansion team that have got off to a great start to their life in MLS. We saw this last time with St. Louis City, with them winning their first 5 games and on their way finishing at the top of the Western Conference. And as I said about San Diego, I don't think they're going to finish at the top of the Western Conference. I think with the way that that year when St. Louis finished at the top of the Western Conference, I even mentioned they actually didn't even break the most points total that LAFC still holds in terms of most points an expansion team has ever got, and that they finished first in the West mainly because the West was relatively weak and relatively balanced that year, and as a result, they finished first in the standings. Now, do I think San Diego might break that points record that LAFC have? We'll see. Again, it is still early days. I've been actually very impressed of what Mikey Veras has done. And what's kind of interesting about this San Diego team that's different from the St. Louis side is that while St. Louis has that kind of mindset of being a pressing team and capitalizing on missed opportunity, that's not the kind of how this San Diego team operates. This San Diego team is kind of what you expect a Greg Berhalter kind of type of team operate, a possession style of team that will really suffocate you in the midfield and not really allow you to operate too much the attacking end, and they also take advantage of the chances that they've been given. I think the last game against RSL, that was probably the best attacking display that they shown in that game. And even though it took a while for them to finally score the goal to go ahead in that game, you can definitely see that that game there was a lot of promise that what the San Diego team can bring to the table. And again, we'll see whether or not if that continue. And I even mentioned before, well, now no, the San Diego is doing relatively well. It's going to be interesting to see as the season goes along when teams will get a book on them and we'll figure out how to play against the Mikey Vera system. That whether they can keep the incredible run of form that they have in the beginning life of MLS, because that's kind of one of the things we saw with St. Louis City of why as the season goes along they definitely slow down when it comes to the points total and the amount of wins, because teams started to figure out how to play against Bradley Carnell. And as soon as you don't make those mistakes against the St. Louis City side in terms of the press, we saw how St. Louis, there was definitely some big exposed kind of fraud, or not exposed kind of fraud, but more like just kind of some big problem that the St. Louis City side has that Bradley Carnell really can't quite finish or can't quite fixing it. And we'll see whether or not if that could be the case with Mikey Veras, where teams will figure out how to solve the San Diego side, the incredible run that they have in the beginning of the season. And then, of course, the LA Galaxy. As I mentioned, it's been a disastrous start to the season. In fact, they made in the wrong end of history of becoming the first defending champ to lose their first free game of the season. And we can always talk about the injuries that they've suffered. Yes, they have been suffering some brutal injuries to begin the season, and also them kind of being penalized and have to pay the cup tax with losing some key guys due to salary cap constraint. But one thing I would say that is a bit of a concern for this Galaxy side, and one of the things that isn't really talked about a lot, is the fact that in the offseason they definitely make some very questionable move. I think probably the most questionable move the this offseason they made is moving on Mark Delgado to LAFC. I was really surprised that they decided to move on from him, especially the fact that you can clearly see Marco Royce is not the answer for this team. He is clearly washed up and clearly a guy that is over the hill as well. And then I think the other move that kind of blow up in their face, at least early on, is Christian Ramirez. He has not really been the Jan Joveljic replacement that they hope to do. Haven't even come close to scoring the goals so far this season, and has been a relative disappointment. But again, I think the other thing that is kind of self-inflicted is Greg Vanny in terms of the tactics, and also the fact that the goalkeeping situation is a big problem for this Galaxy team. Again, I am really surprised the fact that they decided to put Mikovic as the main goalkeeper this season. I mean, I get that they of course have they invested a lot on him, and I think this was kind of always the plan that they were going to really have him be the starter over McCarthy. But yeah, I mean McCarthy's the guy that won you the MLS Cup, and he's looked really decent last season as well. Mikovic has not been anywhere close to that. In fact, that last game that he had against St. Louis, that was probably the worst game that he had played for the Galaxy, and it gets to a point where is the Galaxy maybe thinking about bringing back McCarthy, and especially the fact that is there going to be a goalkeeping uh, revolving door that is going to happen to this Galaxy team as the season goes along. And then the next thing I want to talk about is the bad defensive mistake that we've seen in the opening weekend, and also a little bit after that as well. Yeah, the opening weekend it was kind of brutal seeing all these goals that scored because of bad defensive mistake. And I've mentioned before the reason why that was the case is because a lot of these defenders, we talk about attackers being very rusty going forward. The same goes with defenders as well. I mean, I'm pretty sure all these defenders are relatively rusty, not up to speed in terms of competitive level, and that's where we see the defensive mistake that has happened. Though I will say that this opening weekend, this was probably the most I've seen in recent year as well. I mean, just the constant defensive lapse and the constant goals that is conceded either because of bad defensive turnover or just goalkeeper decided to give the ball right to the opposition. I mean, it was kind of surreal to see, and we're still seeing it too as the season goes along. And I wouldn't be surprised we're going to continue to see it throughout the season as well, because that's kind of how MLS works when it comes to the fact that there's a reason why a lot of Eurosnob always dunk on this league because of bad defensive mistake. Which this league is not just a league that has always have bad defensive mistake. And in many ways, I would say that the defense, at least in the early part of the season, has kind of improved, even though from what we saw in the opening weekend. Because when you look at the goals tally so far in the early part of the season, it feels like goals have started to gone down this season. We haven't seen as much goal, at least in this early part of the season, compared to what we saw last season in the early part as well. But there's no doubt that yeah, it doesn't excuse the fact that even with the goals being down, a lot of the goals that have conceded this season, especially in the opening weekend, was because of bad defense mistake that you usually do not see teams made it, and even the best team in the league make those defensive mistakes as well. Comment I can make is that Atlanta and Columbus, with its early struggle on the attack. Now, Columbus is understandable because when you decide to move on from Cucho Hernandez and Christian Ramirez and lose a lot of attacking power in this team, it doesn't matter what Wilfred Nancy has done with this team. When you lose those two key players, yeah, there's going to be a major setback in this team, and this is where it will be very interesting to see whether or not if they can maybe just nurse this until the summer transfer window where they find the right replacement. But for Atlanta, there's got to be some concern with the early struggle that they have on the attack. And some might say, how are they having early struggle on the attack when they scored 3 goals so far in their first 3 games? Yeah, that came in the first three. That came in the opening game against Montreal. And while in that opening game, there was definitely some signs that the attack was doing well, and there are some signs that guys like Miguel Almiron and Latte Laugh can really connect with each other. We haven't really quite seen it in the last couple of games. They have not been pulling enough, and for the amount of money that they spent on the attack, this should not be a team that should be shut out 2 games already into the season, and that's got to be a lot of concern if you're an Atlanta United fan. And again, this is kind of the problem that Atlanta has, where every time you think that this team is truly back to being at the best as they were in 2017 and 2018, they suffer a major setback because it feels like the rhythm is not there. And I would say that as much as they are definitely concerned about Atlanta and their record breaking attack is not clicking the way it is, maybe it's because of early season rust. And again, I've always said before, it doesn't matter what player profile it is. Every player is going to take time to adjust in this league, and there's no doubt that I think Latte Laugh is going to really hit for this team as the season goes along. And there's no doubt that Almiron will find himself back to the old form that he has, and even Moranchek himself maybe finally turn the corner this season and connect with those front three as well. And then moving on to the next observation I see is Sporting KC. So yeah, Sporting KC also made the wrong end of history of becoming the 5th MLS team to lose 10 consecutive game in a row going back to last year. And there's no doubt that I might even make a video about that as well. And I even mentioned before that if there's 2 head coach that I can think of right away that is definitely on the hot seat and could potentially be let go as soon as the first 10 game of the season, it's got to be Peter Vermes or Caleb Porter. And we'll get to Caleb Porter in just a bit in terms of one of the observations. In fact, that's the last observation I'll talk about. But yeah, it's been a disastrous start to the season for Peter Vermes' side. I mean, even with the new signings that they made, it hasn't really quite worked out. Now, again, part of that maybe is the new signing need to really get the surrounding going, and that's why they kind of got off to the slow start. But the big concern of this team has got to be the defensive end, and this is not a big surprise. I mean, this team has had defensive issue for the past couple of years. The fact that they haven't really quite really addressed that for the past couple of years is concerning, but also the fact that again the the big elephant of the room of Sporting KC struggle is clearly goes back to Peter Vermes. He is a guy that clearly is past his time with Sporting KC, and that I even mentioned this is probably the closest we're gonna see for him to potentially either step down or be remove as the head coach of the Sporting KC side. And I know the Sporting KC front office is showing a lot of loyalty to Peter Vermes, but it's just getting to a point where if the resort are not there, and especially with the fan base, pretty much have now almost reunited by saying that yeah, he is clearly the answer and he needs to move on from his job. you got to say the front office had no choice to do so. This kind of feels very similar to what we saw with Ben Olsen doing his time with DC United, where he's been there for a very long time. The DC fan base were almost begging for the front office to eventually fire him, and even though they didn't really quite say that they fire him at the end, they kind of decided to say that he stepped down and promoted within the team, which I think that could be the same case with Peter Vermes as well. At the end of the day, you can clearly see that this team needs a new voice that desperately. When you have a guy that's been there for 15 plus years, especially a guy that in the last couple of years his voice and his tactics has gone stale, it's really kind of the time for the changes to be made, and I would not be surprised it could finally happen this year. This might finally be the year where it finally caught up to Peter Mays that yeah, he maybe be is not up for it anymore in terms of being the head coach of the Sporting KC side. But one guy is definitely up for it when it comes to the head coaching side is Bruce Arena. So there's no doubt that Bruce Arena is having his redemption arc this year, and I'm hoping that that is the case because as a Quakes fan, it's been a miserable uh that decade long following this team. But this might be the most optimist I would say about this team, and it's kind of already shown in the first three games where he has done it again. Just a great early season revival for the Quakes. Yes, I know they did lose to Minnesota in the last game, and I know they didn't play relatively well, but keep in mind, Minnesota is considered to be a top four team, in my opinion, in the West, and they probably have right now one of the best defense in the league right now. And not to mention, they did not have Hernan Lopez in that game. If Hernan Lopez actually played that game for the Quakes, I think there could be a chance that the Quakes probably could have got a point out of that game against Minnesota, if not all 3 points. But there's no doubt what Bruce Arena has done early in this season and really just completely changed the losing mentality of this team in a nutshell. I mean, that 4-0 win against RSL was a big statement, but I think even a bigger statement is the 2-1 win against Sporting KC. Yes, I know Sporting KC is on a bad losing streak, but the fact that I've seen previous Quakes team, especially in that game when they went down to 10 men on the road, that's usually a death sentence for the Quakes. Not with this Bruce Arena teams. Somehow he's able to, to survive and get all 3 points. And again, I know it is our early days, and as much as I say I'm very optimistic, you know me when it comes to being the Quakes, I tend to be a little bit harsher on them, and I at times be very pessimistic at time for them. I do think that there are definitely some changes that I've seen with this team that maybe this team not only is not going to finish in the one spoon spot, but maybe there's a chance that this team can make it to the playoffs, and maybe just maybe finally PayPal Park would actually get a home playoff game. I mean, I know that they probably won't finish as one of the better team in the Western Conference, even though they're kind of right up there in terms of the standings. But there's no doubt that this team is going to be good enough to make it to the playoffs and especially get a home playoff game. And that's literally all I ask for this team. I mean, this season, my expectation is always going to be low with this team, but with the way that they've been playing right now, yeah, there's no doubt I'm very happy of how the Quakes have been playing, and we'll see whether they can keep that up as the season goes along. And then the last thing that I want to mention is that, yeah, Bruce Arena, former team, is not doing very well. And as I mentioned before, the two head coach potentially could be let go within the first 10 game. Caleb Porter is definitely on that list. I mean, yes, I understand in terms of the roster turnover that they had this off season. It's going to take a while to implement, but scoring 0 goals in the first three games and not scoring a single goal at all and become the only MLS team to not do so while the defense is still a relatively mess is not going to help his case of the fact that this team is going to turn a corner. I mean, it just feels like from what we've seen in the early part of the season, it's the same problem that they had last season as well. They can't attack, they can't defend, they can't win to save their lives, and it's getting to a point where if this can continue for this Bruce Arena side, I don't see how he's going to be able to stay with this job as well. I mean, it's getting to a point where if you make all these signings and there's literally no improvement whatsoever with the team, I mean, you can question the front office with the job that they've done, which was not great whatsoever. But at the end of the day, when it look at how this team is set up game in and game out, there's no sign that say that this team is going to improve under Caleb Porter, and especially the pressure is now even higher than ever because now that he has his team and his team is not performing in the early season, if this can continue, I would not be surprised he would be let go of this team. I mean, I even said last season it was a miracle that he made it uh in the end of the season with all the roster turnover that they have. I think this might be the year, and he is pretty much right now alongside with Peter Vermes dead on in terms of the odds of being the first to be let go. I mean, if you really want to look at the odds, it's actually relatively close. I think both of them are right up there in terms of the two that is most likely going to be the first to let go this season. But I think Caleb Porter might be the strongest point, mainly because, well, Peter and me at least still have that loyalty from the front office. You can't say the same about Caleb Porter. With him with this refs front office, if things does not go well, this New England front office will not hesitate in terms of deciding to let go of Caleb Porter. But there you have it. That is pretty much it. Looking at the team observation in this early MLS season. Again, there probably is more observation that I missed throughout this video, and that's why it's a great time for you guys to let me know in the comments below in terms of what your early observation you have seen so far in this early MLS season. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.